What's up YouTube, Capital G here talking about Yu-Gi-Oh's first ever speed dueling skill card that has finally been revealed, why I love this idea so much, and why I think that this could, and honestly in my opinion should, come to the actual competitive card game that we all know, love, and play. So first things first, what the hell am I even talking about? What is a skill card? What is this? Because I understand that maybe not all of you guys, or majority of you guys probably didn't watch my video on how Konami is making, physical speed duels a real thing. If you guys don't know what speed duels are, basically they're like condensed Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, I guess the simplest way that I can explain it is essentially it's like Duel Links but in real life. It's kind of like a smaller anime type duel. You can see some of the rules here. You start with 4,000 light points, that's kind of like anime rules. You open with 4 cards instead of 5. Your minimum or your main deck size is 20 to 30 cards instead of the 40 to 60 that we use in competitive. The extra deck size is like 5 spots, and each player gets a skill card. So basically it's simplified condensed dueling a la Duel Links, but Konami is actually supporting this with a physical release. They're going to start selling starter decks that are, I believe, are going to be like $10, and basically I look at this as kind of just a side project that Konami is interested in. By the way, side projects like this are nothing new. If you ask any of your OG Yu-Gi-Oh players, or even any of the Yu-Gi-Tubers like Simo or John Moore Lithium, people who have been playing this game since the DM days, you know that every so often Konami will, kind of do something a little interesting where they're just trying to see what sticks and what, new types of ways that they can bring to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or new types of forms of Yu-Gi-Oh! We saw it way back when with Dungeon Dice Monsters. That wasn't really successful, but, they made a 5-part episode for it, and, they actually made it as a product, didn't really pan out. Konami has done this with the Hobby Leagues. If you guys remember, like the parallel Hobby League rares, Konami used to have special rules for Hobby Leagues way back in the day. Those were held at like Toys R Us and KB Toys and stuff, where all the monsters in your deck had to be the same like type, and all those types of weird things with draft and whatnot. Sometimes these things end up being successful, sometimes they don't. But with these speed duels, Konami has implemented a brand new mechanic called skill cards, and I'm going to read you guys my skill card and the reason why I love this so much, and why I think that this should actually be implemented into the real card game. So first things, let's go ahead and look at my skill card, and then we'll talk about why I think that this is a good idea. So my skill card, and this is the front of the card, it says My Valentine. It actually looks like it's taken straight from Duel Links, honestly. It says skill card, at the start of the duel, flip this card over. Okay, fair enough. That's pretty easy to understand. Basically, as soon as you start the duel, flip over the skill card, and her skill card is called Tribal Energy, My/skill. It says if you have an Amazoness monster and a Harpy monster in your hand, reveal them and then draw 1 card. Okay, that's not really like broken, and it's also pretty simple to understand. You got a Harpy, you got an Amazoness, show them to your opponent, and boom, you get yourself a nice +1. Really cool, because I think it's kind of balanced. You have to show your opponent the cards, so your opponent's getting information, but at the same time, you're getting a brand new resource. Now, it continues on to say, if you control an Amazoness monster and a Harpy monster, draw 2 cards. Now, that is incredible. And it also says, each one of these skills can only be used once per duel. So these are hard once per duel effects, which I think it's actually kind of cool, because number one, this skill card has an incredibly high ceiling, because you can actually apply both of these effects in the same turn. You could be looking at basically getting a +3 for free, but at the same time, you gotta play Harpies and Amazoness in the same fucking deck, and who honestly wants to do that? Not just have them in your hand, but you gotta get them on the field if you want to reap all those rewards. And again, it is a hard once per duel on those 2 effects that kind of keeps it in order. But this is why I like this idea. I like this idea of these skill cards, because the simplicity of this is so ridiculously, it's so high. I think that this is something that any Yu-Gi-Oh player, especially a player who's been playing the game for a while, but even newer players, can just wrap their head around this incredibly easily. Like, honestly, wouldn't you think that if this was a field spell, wouldn't it just honestly feel like another card that was coming out of the Duelist pack, 21 or something like that? Because the new Duelist pack has Akiza and it has Mai. If this was just a field spell and it wasn't a skill card, wouldn't this just feel like, another kind of card that Konami was giving to support Mai as a character? Like, this just feels like something that we could honestly get in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, and nobody would no one would have a second thought about it. But the reason I like this is because, again, this is so so simple to understand. One of the things that Yu-Gi-Oh struggles with, in my opinion, is when Konami implements new mechanics, which they have to every so often, which, you know, they generally do it once per era. At the beginning of the era, they'll introduce a new mechanic. Obviously, it's to keep the game fresh. When a trading card game has been running 20 years, you got to find new ways to keep the game interesting. But when you look at the last two mechanics as a whole, I think that they were incredibly convoluted and they were very difficult. Yu-Gi-Oh already has an incredibly high learning curve. Some people say that Yu-Gi-Oh is the most difficult card game to learn. And if you look at Yu-Gi-Oh's last four eras, what have we gotten? We've got summoning mechanic after summoning mechanic after summoning mechanic. A lot of people, I'm still a little undecided on this, but a lot of people think that we didn't need a new summoning mechanic when we entered the Vrains era. That after getting Synchro, Exceed, and Pendulum all in a row, it was like, bro, do we really need another summoning mechanic on top of this? And then when you look at Link summoning, it wasn't just Link summoning. It was the fact that Konami overhauled the entire board, so we had to learn a new board. Konami introduced new monster zones, and then a main monster zone and extra monster zones. The Pendulum scales moved. Then we had all of these questions about Link monsters. So wait a minute, they can't go face down? Wait, where's the defense of this thing? Okay, sometimes I use them and they count as Link 1. Sometimes I use them and they count as their original values. What exactly is co-link? Like, there's so many questions every time Konami implements new mechanics. Same thing could be said with Pendulum, which I think was just as bad. Wait a minute, so they're half spells and they're half monsters. When you activate them, they count as spells, but if you destroy them in the Pendulum scale, their monster effects trigger. They don't go to the graveyard, and it's just, you know, the last couple of mechanics have been incredibly difficult to learn. One of the reasons that I've always said that the Exceed mechanic is the best in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not my favorite. We all know that my favorite mechanic is Fusion, but the reason that I always thought that the Exceed mechanic was the best because Exceed is the most practical mechanic we've ever had in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's so simple that anyone from a brand new duelist to somebody who's been playing the game for 16 years like me to even a 5-year-old dragon duelist can understand the concept of 2 level 4 monsters. Boom, you get an Exceed monster. Like, Exceed summoning is very intuitive, and you can teach someone how to Exceed summon as soon as you teach them what levels are in Yu-Gi-Oh! It takes you about 5 minutes to understand. When I look at these skill cards and how Konami could easily implement this into the game, they kind of just look like field spells, to be honest. I mean, imagine if Konami in Era 7 of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I get it, maybe it's a little too early to be talking about Era 7 of Yu-Gi-Oh! We're really only like 1 full year in the TCG of the Vrains era and, you know, Link summoning and all that good stuff. But imagine if Konami just said, okay, these skill cards are going to be the mechanic for the 7th era of Yu-Gi-Oh! They're basically just going to go on the top of your extra deck. You flip them over at the beginning of the duel. They always stay at the top of your extra deck. You can still, you know, pendulum summon and use monsters from your extra deck as normal, but this stays at the top so your opponent can always read it. Wouldn't this just kind of feel like a field spell, and you can make them all kind of like hard once per duels because they're basically free cards. You don't draw them or anything like that to keep them kind of balanced. I mean, imagine this. Let's say you're playing a Blue Eyes deck and you activate your, you know, Kaiba skill where, you know, any one of your Blue Eyes monsters, when it attacks your opponent's monster, or no, just anytime it battles an opponent's monster, during damage calculation, you get to double the attack of a Blue Eyes monster, any Blue Eyes monster, Alternative Dragon, you know, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Chaos Max Dragon, etc., etc. Like, that would be a nice little boost for Blue Eyes, but it wouldn't be complicated. It would be something that's just simple and intuitive. Now, would I say that this is Yu-Gi-Oh's natural progression? Probably not, but I think that this would be a simple and just a very good progression for Yu-Gi-Oh, because I don't think that Yu-Gi-Oh needs to get any more complicated and convoluted. Because we got 4 mechanics or 4 summoning mechanics in a row, I kind of feel like Yu-Gi-Oh, if it actually lasts that long, I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh can probably go a couple of eras without us getting another summoning mechanic. We don't need red monsters as of right now. We don't need to, you know, rework the entire fucking game board. Give us something simple that we can just pick up and learn in about 5 minutes. That's one of the reasons that a lot of people like Synchro and a lot of people like Exceed, because they were simple. But with the last couple of mechanics, Yu-Gi-Oh has gotten really confusing, and I think that this could be a way of simplifying Yu-Gi-Oh while at the same time, you know, keeping things fresh. Yu-Gi-Oh has to constantly add things to keep it fresh, but it doesn't have to add things that are complicated. And I really like this idea. And honestly, Even if you're an old school player who used to watch like the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, to me this kind of reminds me of Deck Masters. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how like the Dragon Ball Super Card game works. I went to ARG Charlotte to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and I saw lots of Dragon Ball Z players, and I didn't know what the hell was going on when they're playing the game. But I would walk around and I'd see Cell and Golden Frieza, Vegeta, and Goku Trunks, and I'd be like, oh, that looks kind of cool. I don't understand why Yu-Gi-Oh can't do something similar to that. Just have Mai, or have Manjume Thunder, Chaz, have Jaden, or other characters who are prominent in the anime. Just have them sitting on top of your extra deck, ready to activate their skill. And even for decks that aren't in the anime, like Zodiac or dual terminal decks like Teller Knights, you could just have like generic ones that can be based on those archetypes, or you can have anime characters who have multiple trait cards, and some of them can be, rather than supporting an archetype, can be maybe supporting a play style. Like if you're like me, a really defensive player, maybe you have a skill card that you take half battle damage during a couple of your opponent's battle phases or something like that. So essentially you're immune to like being OTK'd, or you can block effect damage for one turn up to like 2,000 damage or something like that. I don't know, I'm just grasping at straws here because I really think that this is a good idea, but I don't want Konami to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If this game ends up failing like Dungeon Dice Monsters, I feel like they have a good idea here, and I kind of feel like they need to implement this into the game. I don't know how you'd implement this into the anime. Actually, no, we do, because we already saw it with Deck Masters and Yu-Gi-Oh with the Noah arc and the digital world. I mean, maybe they wouldn't have the anime ones be based on characters from past anime, but the point that I'm making is I think that this is a really good idea, and my favorite thing about it is it's so simple. So you guys let me know what you think of skill cards, and how would you feel if these came to the actual trading card game? Like if this came to the physical trading card game for competitive, for our maybe generation or era 7's new mechanic. If it was something like this, how would you feel? Would you quit Yu-Gi-Oh? Would you hate it? Would you love it? Let it be known in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already. Turn on that notification bell for daily videos, and enjoy these other videos that I hope you'll like.